Good morning, church. I want everyone to do me a favor. Raise your hand if you have ever had the displeasure of following or being in the car with someone else who was not a reliable navigator. Okay? Raise your hand. Okay. That's kind of few, actually, I thought. Okay. Keep your hands up. Okay. Keep your hands up. Put them down if you are the kind of person that can just go, we'll get there. Wow, okay, you guys are better people than me, okay? Because I find following somebody who doesn't know where they're going to be extremely frustrating and anxiety-producing. Here's a fun example. It was the summer of 2021, so this is the second COVID summer. And we had planned, I was still doing youth ministry, we had planned a full summer. We were going to have a mission trip to Brazil. We were going to have a mission trip to southwestern Missouri. Everything still got canceled. Everyone was still going, we just can't host people. It's just still too dangerous. And so we had nothing. We had nothing planned. And we were just like, we have to do something. This is just too much. It's just too much to not be around each other. So we said, let's just take our students somewhere where it's fun. It's okay to just go and to be together and have fun together. And so we said, let's go plan a mystery trip. And we went and found a place, a city where we could go and spend most of our time outside, right? So that we're still kind of being somewhat safe. And we decided that we were going to take a mystery trip where the students would not know where they're going to Denver, Colorado. Lots of fun things to do outside. And we got the parents together. We told them where they were going. But we said, hey, don't tell your students. It's going to be a mystery until we get to Denver. So we loaded in the vans, and we're driving, and they are just trying to figure out where we're going. And before we left, we asked them, what's your best guess? And they said, Fredericksburg. And then we start heading north, and they go, David, please tell me you're not taking us to Lubbock. And so we keep traveling, and we're still going. We pass Amarillo, and we make a stop in Dumas, Texas, which is about an hour north of Amarillo. And one group wants to go to McDonald's that is attached to the gas station. And those who are a little more health conscious, like myself, we decided to make the trip to Subway, because those are your two options in Dumas, Texas. And it just so happened that it was me and every teenage young woman on the trip, and my coworker Ashley, who was an adult, so it was okay. But we go and pull up to Subway in a church van, a Ford Econoline, with the paint chipping and peeling. And we pour out of this van, me and like 13 young women. And so that looks a little weird. And we're going through the line. And I'm about halfway through the line, about halfway through our folks. And the Subway sandwich artist is a very friendly person. And she starts making small talk. And she asks, where are you guys from? And in that moment, I realize the next question is going to be really awkward. The young woman to my left, who's still going through the line, says, we're from Abilene. And the Subway sandwich artist asks, where are you going? Now, I knew that was going to be an awkward moment. I did not realize how badly a person could actually answer that question. She said, we don't know. He won't tell us. And my brain just is racing. I'm like, I can't say that. Nope, that'll make it worse. No, I can't say that. That'll make it worse. And Ashley, my coworker, says, try again. And she explains, our parents know where we're going. We're a youth group. We're headed to Denver. Well, we don't know where we're going, but it's okay. He's not abducting us. I went and sat down and was just waiting for the police to come, but it was okay. They didn't come. It really messes with people when they don't know where they're going. It's really hard to just trust and follow. And so this is a good opportunity for us to talk about a word that we use a lot. That word is missional. The answer to our sermon series question today, who is the Lord? The answer is the Lord is missional. But that word has been so used and abused and borrowed and mistreated that I want us to get really, really clear on what it actually means that God is missional. I think the anxiety of not knowing where we're going is today in churches across North America the most anxiety-producing question that we have. When I talk to people, they are not worried long-term about the church. We believe God is taking us somewhere better. We believe in God, that God is still in charge of the church, and that God will lead us to lands of promise, lands overflowing with life. But it's in the immediate, in the midst of such disruptive times, in the context of what some people are now calling multipolarity, where everyone's just against everybody on everything. There's just two sides on everything. The most anxiety-producing question is, where are we going next? And so, into this conversation, I think it is really wise and helpful to think about a God who is missional. What does missional mean? The Lord is missional. Missional comes from this Latin word that goes all the way back to St. Augustine called missio Dei. Can we say missio Dei? Missio Dei. If you want to impress your friends and sound like you've gone to graduate school, you can say missio Dei, but you don't have to, okay? Missio Dei is fine. Missio is Latin for mission, but I think it's actually more helpful to think of it as sent. When we say the Lord is missional, what we mean is the Lord sends God's self. In the text today, God sends plagues. God sends himself as a manifestation in the burning bush. God sends himself as a manifestation of a light, pillar of fire, and a pillar of cloud. And God continues to send God's self in all these different manifestations throughout Scripture. Even in the beginning of time, when God creates the world through words. The word that is sent from God begins the world. The word that will then come as Jesus Christ is that word from the beginning. God, from the beginning of time, through here in Exodus, through Jesus, and today, is sending God's self in all of these different ways. So when we talk about missional, what we have to remember is that mission always originates with God. We do not initiate mission. Mission belongs to God. What we hope for as the church is to have, here's another Latin term, visio divina. That's probably pretty easy to figure out. Divine vision. When we talk about mission and vision, the church needs to develop habits for divine seeing. Why? So that we can see the way that God is sending God's self through the Spirit, through the Son, through the Word, through the plagues, through the burning bush, through the pillar of fire, through the pillar of cloud. God is always on mission. God is missional. We believe God is missional in our communities today. But how do we have that divine vision? How do we follow a God every step of the way when God takes turns that don't make much sense? Divine vision is hard. Trusting in God is harder. Following God is hardest. But that's our text today. Today we are seeing a people who are following a pillar of fire and a pillar of cloud on a path that does not make sense. And so I want us to imagine for a moment what it might look like in the churches that maybe we grew up in or the churches we've been a part of. What would these churches, how would they respond to following a God on a path that does not make sense? So I want us to imagine a church that does not exist, a church that only exists in my mind. Any similarities to churches that you might know are purely coincidental, but I want us to think about the church of Exodus at 10th and Gripe. The Church of Exodus 10th and Gripe has a member on it. His name is Bill. Bill is a deacon at the Church of 10th and Gripe, and he wakes up the morning of Passover, and he is excited. He is excited because the Egyptians are just like walking up to him, and they're handing him gold and silver. And we find even in this text, they're prepared for battle, and so maybe even their own weapons. And they're saying, get out of here. And Bill can sometimes be a half-glass empty sort of guy. He's like, this is kind of heavy. I wish you'd stop giving me all this silver, all this gold, and these weapons. But okay, we are headed to God's promised land, and so I am on board. Let's go. And they start going, and as the weight in Bill's hands gets heavier, he goes, I think we just missed the exit. What's that you say? We're going the long way on purpose. Okay, sure, Bill thinks. Let's just keep going this way. I can be on board. I don't understand why we're avoiding the Philistines. I've got these weapons in my hand. And the narrator clearly just said, we left Egypt prepared for battle, and not to mention, God just defeated a much stronger army in Egypt, but okay, we will avoid the Philistines and go the long way? Sure, no problem. I can handle that. And as Bill kind of keeps talking to himself down and trying to tell himself to trust and to remember him and his wife, they go to their small group. And their friends, Bill and Bev, they go to their small group that's hosted by their friends Steve and Sally. And they've been going to small group with them for their as long as they can remember. These are close friends. And Steve and Sally, they welcome him and they say, come on in. We got leftovers. We got some roasted lamb, some unleavened bread. Come on. And they talk and they fellowship and they start their prayer time. And just as Bill is starting to get over his frustration with going the long way when it clearly makes much more sense to go the direct way, his friend Steve says, I need prayer requests. I need us to pray for me to trust. I am having a really hard time trusting our leaders because, back in Egypt, I was a cartographer, and it was my job to make the maps to help us figure out how to get all the straw so that we can make our own bricks. I know this desert like the back of my hand, and we are not going the most direct route. And Bill, he's trying to be a good guy. He's trying to be a good guy and not create dissension, but he leaves the small group that morning so frustrated and full of anxiety that we are not just going the most direct route. Well, the next morning, it just gets worse. The next morning, Bill wakes up to discover that the cloud of fire has led them to the shore of the Red Sea. The Red Sea surrounds them on three sides, and the rumor has it that Pharaoh has decided to harden his heart one more time, and the Egyptian army is on its way. And Bill cannot stand it. He finds Steve, he finds their other friends, he finds anyone who will listen. And they talk about how silly and ridiculous it is that their leaders have now brought them to a place where they are surely doomed. And they begin doing something that they will continue to do for the rest of their time in Egypt. They murmur. Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in this wilderness? What have you done to us to bring us out of Egypt? Is this not the very thing that we told you when we were in Egypt? Leave us alone so that we can serve not God, the Egyptians. The desire of their heart was to just keep things making sense. And as the Egyptian army bears down on them one more time, Pharaoh's ruthless logic of power and violence overwhelms their imagination for God's promised lands. And they say, "What are you doing? Why wouldn't you just let us worship Pharaoh?" So how do we follow God's mission when the ways God sends himself and the direction God seems to be taking us doesn't make any sense? Maybe the path doesn't make sense to us because for 400 years we've lived in Pharaoh's land and we are still too schooled in Pharaoh's logic. Maybe we have to unlearn the logic of Pharaoh. When I was in ninth grade, I was forced to read The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I was not a good student. My best grades were C's and D's. But I was told, under the threat of never playing football again in my life, you have to read this book and you have to pass some like quizzes and stuff on this book, okay? And so I read it, and I learned through The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I actually might like reading. This is kind of an interesting book. And you probably remember the story of Huckleberry Finn, but it's occurring in pre-war Missouri, pre-Civil War Missouri. And Huckleberry Finn I kind of identified with him. He was a kid who didn't love school, didn't love sitting for long periods of time. And his father, well, this is where I don't identify, but his father is an abusive alcoholic, and all Huck wants to do is to be in the forest and to run and to play. But there's one positive person in his life. The positive person in his life is Mrs. Watson, his neighbor. And she's like really the only adult that loves him. But like a lot of us, the adults that love us and care for us also tend to give us some mixed messages. Miss Watson, at some point in the book, tells him that white people who help black people, enslaved people, escape slavery, well, they're not following Scripture. And so they're in danger of hell. And you know probably the rest of the story at this point. Huck escapes his abusive alcoholic father, and he runs away to this island in the middle of the Mississippi River. And there he meets Mrs. Watson's enslaved servant, Jim. And Jim is running away. And they decide to get on a boat, to get on a raft, and to go down the Mississippi together. And the story of Huckleberry Finn is Huckleberry unlearning the messages of his youth, the messages of Pharaoh. The story continues of Jim and Huck saving each other's lives and talking and growing together and learning about each other's lives, learning about each other's perspectives. And Huck starts to see Jim not as a runaway enslaved person, but as a friend. And then they get caught. They get caught by two slave traders. And Huck's best idea at that point is to write a letter back to Mrs. Watson and to say, come help us, because I'm in trouble. I want to go home. As bad as home is, I want to go back home. And he looks at that letter and he realizes that if he sends it, his friend will be sold back into slavery. And he'll make it off okay, but his friend will be sold back into slavery. And he hears Mrs. Watson's voice in his head, and he hears her say that a white person who helps a black person escape slavery is destined for hell. And he looks at the letter and he says, I guess I'll go to hell. And he rips it up. And I think what Mark Twain is trying to teach us in his humorous, often coarse way is that only in Pharaoh's logic could such a truth be true. And we have to unlearn the things that Pharaoh's logic of ruthless violence and power has taught us. Because every church, most churches in America, when Mark Twain is writing this, is teaching that logic. If you would go to church, you would hear something similar. That was the predominant logic of the day. And today, I hope we would all clearly call that heresy, vile, hatred. But it was the logic of the day. It was the straight path. And for Huck to unlearn it, he has to say, I would rather go to hell than be untrue to the truth I have learned. I think we have to unlearn so much of what we've been taught to really follow a God that's on mission. For God's ways to seem followable, we have to unlearn so much. There's this book that was written a long, long time ago, around the same time as the Canterbury Trails. And it is in Middle English, and even the translations today all have all the these and the thines, and it's hard to follow. It's called The Cloud of Unknowing. The Cloud of Unknowing. And basically, the Cloud of Unknowing, so you don't have to read it yourself, is this idea: God is too big to be known. God can't be known, and we don't really want a God that fits within our frames of logic. We don't really want a God that fits just outside of our frames of logic. We want a God that explodes our wildest dreams of what is possible. We want a God whose idea of goodness destroys all of our logic of goodness. We want a God who is so powerful and good and just and merciful that he doesn't make sense. And the good news is, that's true. God is not knowable primarily from our intellects. God is knowable, says the Cloud of Unknowing, by our love. Or it says it this way. The author is asking himself this question rhetorically: how shall I think about God and what God is? And he answers, I don't know. Of all of my meditation and all of my thinking and all my study, I don't know how to think about God. And therefore, I would leave all that thing that I can think. I will leave everything I can think and choose to my love that thing I can't think. For why? God may well be loved, but not thought. By love may God be gotten and holden, but thought never. You cannot adequately think God. You can fully love God. You can know God fully by falling in love with God. And I believe our love is the church's pillar of fire and pillar of cloud. It is not our reason. It is not our intellect. If we were just to poll everybody in this room, what's the next right step? We would have like 350, 400 different judges, and we would all disagree. We can't take the next step by agreeing on everything. We can follow God to places that may not even fit our logic by loving God. And so I want to invite you to a practice that's been really helpful for me. This is a practice, I'm going to go back a slide, a practice called breath prayer. So raise your hand if you've ever heard about or practiced or taught breath prayer. Breath prayer is really easy because everybody can breathe. But the concept is this: as you breathe in, you say one thing, oftentimes thinking about things that you want to internalize, that you want to bring in. And then as you breathe out, you say something different, often something that you want to externalize. Not always bad things, sometimes things that you want to be true, but also sometimes things that you want to maybe expel. And then you do it again because you've got to breathe again. And you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again. I think one of our superpowers is that we don't control much, but we control our attention. And breath prayer is a great way to control our attention. And so my habit of breath prayer is this. I want to breathe in, and as I breathe in, I say, God, I breathe in your great love for me. God, I breathe in your great love for me. That's what I say in my head as I breathe in. And because I sometimes struggle with control, because sometimes I'm going through life with a white-knuckle grip on everything that I think I can control, and because that often gets me into the most trouble, that often gets me most tired, that often gets me most alienated from the people that I love most, the most true thing I can say there with the God that I hope to love deeper is, frankly, what I often say is, I give up. I give up. That can be hard. That's pretty drastic language. And so you might choose to say something like, I give up, or I let go of. And then if I give up is not just working good enough for me, then I make it very specific. I give up control. I give up the need to impress. I give up the need to sound or appear intelligent. And then if I've even got a person in my mind who I feel like I need to see intelligent from us, I will let go of the need to appear intelligent before and say their name. And so what I'm trying to say is on the breath out, I want to get as specific as possible of what I am willing to let go of, because I believe this is the unlearning that will bring us to greater love and affection for God, that will bring us to a place where the God who is on mission can be discoverable by God's people, because this is a practice that helps me love God more as I let go of the logic of Pharaoh. So we're actually going to practice this. I want you right now, I want to kind of warm us up, but we're going to practice breath prayer here together as a church. I want you to breathe in this as we breathe in. God, I breathe in your great love for me. And then as you breathe out, I want you to say, and I let go of, in your mind's voice, I let go of whatever you need to let go of. We're going to practice this for a little while, and then I'll get back up and say one more thing, and we'll continue on in worship. But I want you to have this. I want this to be in your spiritual discipline arsenal, because you can do it anywhere. You can do it while you're driving. You can do it while somebody's talking to you. You can do it I would never do this. You can do it in the middle of a meeting. And it will help you look for God's sending mission. Let's take some time and breathe and pray together. God, I breathe in your great love for me. I breathe out the need to wonder if the sermon was effective. God, I breathe in your great love for me. I breathe out my anxiety about where the church is headed. God, I breathe in your great love for me. I give up. God, it is so freeing for us to give up ourselves into your mission. We believe you are leading us to promised lands. May the peace of our Lord Jesus Christ go with you wherever he might send you. May he guide you into the wilderness. May he protect you in the storm. May he bring you home at all the wonders he has shown you. May he bring you home rejoicing once again to our doors.